The purpose of this show is to guide you to realign with habits that get you to live the life you've always dreamed of. This is the Habit-Based Lifestyle Podcast with Jesse Ewing. This is the Habit-Based Lifestyle, where you can access your full potential right now. Finally break free from destructive habits. That dream life, if you want it, you can have it. This is where you transform your health, mind, business, and relationships. Or do nothing and keep your life the way it is. But if you're ready for change, you're in the right place. This is where you're gonna learn how to live a habit-based lifestyle. You are tuning in to the Habit-Based Lifestyle Podcast with your host, Jesse Ewing. This is the Habit-Based Lifestyle. Let's go.
All right, guys, I want to welcome you back to the Habit-Based Lifestyle Podcast. And today it is about 5 days from the end of 2021. And what I wanted to go through today was really the top 5 lessons that I've learned in each area inside of 2021. Now, we're going to walk through this inside of the 5 areas of health that I teach on and that I talk about on this podcast a lot of time. And today we're going to specifically break this episode up into 2 parts, and we're going to see if we can get through physical health and mental health, and then also relational health today. So biggest lesson I learned inside of physical health is this idea that your health is your responsibility. More than ever, if you really think about this, regardless of your stance on COVID, regardless of your stance on vaccine, I think the one thing that we can all agree on is our health is our responsibility. And taking advice from a medical doctor or expert is really no longer enough. Taking advice from government agencies, things like that is not enough. There's 3 things that I really believe you have to be able to do to be physically healthy and to really understand what that looks like. Now, I will say that, what health looks like to me now versus what it was when I was 20, 21, 22 is way different. What it looked like when I was 30 is much different in the way that I think about it. So I don't really think about health anymore as a 6-pack or, how my muscles look, although, that's great and can often say, okay, obviously my body fat's low enough if I can see those things, but that doesn't necessarily equate to, being healthy. And so one of the things that I look at is, with these 3 key things is we have to be willing to do our own research. Now, there's what the media might say, there's what doctors might say. And then you also realize that doctors can really be in one of 3 categories. They can be kind of on the cutting edge of medicine, constantly researching, constantly trying to get better. There's ones that don't really do anything since medical school outside of do the bare minimum to keep up with their licensing and things like that. And then you have some that are in the middle. And I really believe that this is what's kind of true is what we used to be able to trust that a doctor or trust that a medical professional could give us great advice. And what's happening is that's no longer true. And so we have to be willing to do our own research. Now, do I believe that there's some good doctors out there? Yes, I really believe there's a lot of them out there. We just have to seek them out and find them. But we also have to be willing to do our own research. And this leads into the next thing is we have to also be willing to ask better questions. Now, for a long time, it's like, well, my doctor never told me that. And it's like, well, did you actually ask him? And so we gave the power to them to ask us questions versus us asking them better questions. And so the better questions we can ask them, the better answers we can get back. And so part of doing our own research gives us the ability to be able to ask better questions. And so some of the things, that we're running into today is we have to be able to we have to be able to ask questions that have a validated research and says, hey, I read up on this. Is this true? And then we also have to go back and research what they say. There's so many conflicting things going on in the marketplace right now, and in medicine, and in nutrition, and all these things that we have to be willing to research, and we got to be willing to ask better questions. And then we also have to be willing to not take no for an answer. And so, if we don't agree with maybe what one person says, we got to be willing to go to someone else. And I would always say this: exhaust all other possibilities, exhaust all other things before we take no for an answer. And so if you're in a situation where you're seeking medical advice, I would recommend getting as much as possible, and getting an answer that gives you the opportunity to research it and also ask more questions, but it gives you the ability to dive deeper into that. And I believe those three things is we have to be willing to do. Now, some of the things that I can tell you that I've done is I hired a team of doctors and experts in the field of health and fitness that would work together, from trainers to medical doctors, to also coaches on stress and things like that, where they're all working together and they're all able to do extensive testing and work together. And by doing this is a full blood panel, extensive blood work, genetic testing. And for me, it's really looking at what are the health markers and what are those things saying. And this is really allowing me to look at my health from all angles. I feel like I have a pretty good idea of what I need to do, between diet and nutrition to get me to where I want to go. But really my focus is more on that internal health piece. And I want to make sure I have the best possible people for the future, because we all know it's better to be safe than sorry. Now, the other piece of this is I want to talk about one of the habits that I'm going to be shifting in 2022 that I didn't do a lot of in 2021. And that was doing more physical challenges. Now, I can tell you for a good 4 to 5 years, from probably 2015 to 2018, 19, is I was doing a lot of physical challenges. And I found that when I didn't do them, I felt like I wasn't pushing myself as hard as I could. And, for me, I like to be physically challenged. I find myself wanting to push harder in other areas of life when I physically challenge myself. And so I'm going to be doing some things this year that are going to push me and challenge me physically, which is exactly where I feel like I really want to be pushed inside of my body, inside of my health and things like that. And I'm going to continue to dive deeper into these internal health areas also. And so the big 2022 thing is, hey, what am I changing, or what habit am I going to be implementing? And it's going to be doing challenges. Now, so that's really what would kind of wrap up 2021 inside of my physical health. Now, mental health, we're going to look at, the ways that we communicate with ourselves, our internal dialogue, how that can often get in the way of what you want. And what that really means is that means our thoughts, our stories, our beliefs all point us, if those all point us to getting what you want or what you don't want, then you got to change them. And that means that, hey, if the thoughts that are going on in my mind, if the stories that are going in my mind, if my beliefs are all not getting me what I want, I have to begin to change them. I have to begin to transform them. Now, change happens over a short period. Transformation happens over a longer period. And so we start with change, but we end up with transformation. And that's really the key point inside of this is I really think that we have to begin to renew our mind, not just a one-time thing, but it's really a daily thing. And in order to change our thoughts, we have to change our inner dialogue, and that has to happen daily. Think about this. What we say to ourselves is something that we're going to have to work on every single day. Now, whether that be good right now, maybe your internal dialogue is like, hey, I got it dialed in. You have to continue to work at that to have it. Now, once you have it, Obviously, you don't have to work as hard, but if you don't have it, you're going to have to really work at it. And so, we're going to really talk about the number one thing that I learned was, really changing that internal dialogue to where it has to be something that, are my thoughts in alignment with what I want? Are my stories that I'm telling myself in alignment with what I want? Are my beliefs in alignment with what I want? And the habit that you begin to implement, that I'm going to begin to implement and leverage into 2022 is really, how do I make renewing my mind a habit where I repeat what results I want by my thoughts, by my beliefs, and my stories that are going to get me there. And so one of the books that I really enjoyed reading was Winning a War Within Your Mind. And they talk about replacing the lies, and the lies could be, the stories, it could be the thoughts, it could be the beliefs that we have, and replacing those with God's truth, because the truth sets us free. One of the things that I've already done, and been doing for several years, is reframing. But there's a whole system and process to doing that, just like I learned. But this really made it a lot simpler to do, because I could take thoughts that were lies, I could take stories that were lies, I could take beliefs that were lies, and begin to reframe those into God's truth. Now, where would I find God's truth? Would be in the Bible. So that would mean I would have to open that up daily. And so you could think about like your thoughts taking yourself captive, maybe stories taking yourself captive. And I don't mean captive in the way that, we might think, but captive in the way of kind of putting ourselves in this mental prison. And so the number one habit to master daily is this reframe. And reframing is just simply reframing a thought into a new thought that was a truth, or a story that maybe was a lie into a truth. And so beginning to reframe the lies with truth is something that we can begin to practice and work on every single day. So that's like the big thing working on inside of 2022, inside of our mental health. Now we're going to talk about relational health. So back in July, me and my wife would go to a event that was a marriage revival. We got an opportunity to work on our marriage. We got an opportunity for a few weeks to kind of reset and just think of some things that we could do differently. Now, what I find mostly is marriage is kind of like we get married and then we go on, years, we have kids, we have all these things. But where I really see the breakdown is we kind of stop investing, time, we stop investing money, we stop investing, resources into our marriage. And then we wonder why, it's not where we want it to be. And there wasn't a big follow up to what we did, but we got to renew our vows. We got to go through a process of deliverance in a few areas of our life and just things. But really, it made me think about, like, marriage requires us to empty up stored emotions, stored thoughts, stored feelings from the past. And so I could maybe be upset about my wife or something she had done from 5-10 years ago, and I could have that stored up inside of me as energy, and we have the ability to be able to release that. But imagine if you go 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years with that same issue that you've carried around your whole life. It's almost like we strap on a backpack, and instead of stored up emotions, we start putting rocks, or we start putting sand in that backpack. Well, after 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years of marriage, that backpack begins to get really heavy. That backpack begins to weigh us down. And the same thing in kind of our marriage, that those can add weight to our marriage. Those can add weight to what we're carrying around on a day-to-day basis. And I really believe that we need 1 or 2 times a year where we have the ability to release that. Because when we release it, we get lighter, our relationship gets lighter, and we can understand each other at a deeper level. The other thing that I would say that was really powerful is just seeing my wife vulnerable made me want to be vulnerable. Seeing my wife really fight for our marriage, made me want to fight for our marriage, and knowing that we're working at it together, it gives us a common goal and common place we're pushing for. And I really think that marriage right now, more than ever, is we have to be willing to fight for each other more than fight against each other. In order to grow to a new place in marriage is, we got to get uncomfortable. And without that discomfort, then we're going to have really little to no opportunity for growth. And, I think the biggest habit change that we went through, and maybe the biggest lesson learned, is the power of prayer in marriage shifts so many things. And I think the discipline of praying for your spouse and praying with your spouse, even when you don't feel like it, is very powerful. There's always like, hey, it's easy to pray on the good days or the days that maybe you feel like, doing it. But what about the days where, you always hear the thing about, man, I didn't feel like working out, but whenever I worked out, I always felt better. Well, I may not always feel like praying for my spouse, but the days that I do pray, I always feel better after. There's never been a time where I felt worse after I prayed with my spouse and with my wife. Than I never felt worse praying for her and with her than not doing it at all. And the habit that I'm going to continue to take on this year is, number one, doing a couple marriage retreats or marriage challenges. This year we'll be doing at least 1 to 2. And then also the habit that I'm going to continue to implement. And the reason I say I'm going to do it and magnify that is because I think it's an easy habit to get out of. I want to make prayer with my wife so easy. It's like working out. It's something that I crave. It's something that, no matter what, I'm going to make a habit out of doing it. And that's really why I'm putting it as a habit I'm going to leverage going into 2022, because I know how powerful it is. And I know how important it is. And I want to continue to do it because I've watched what's happened in my marriage, the times that I do it and the times that we don't, and just how big of an impact that has. So stay tuned for Friday, and we will have the business side of it and the spiritual side of it. So thank you guys for being on, and we'll see you next episode.
The purpose of this show is to guide you to realign with habits that get you to live the life you've always dreamed of. This is the Habit-Based Lifestyle Podcast with Jesse